Okay, so we've got a ton of stuff about student loans.
Yeah.
You've sent in YouTube videos, like personal stories, articles, even some historical stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. It can feel
Yeah.
overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? Like
It-
owing more on your loans
Right.
after years of payments
Yeah.
than you originally borrowed.
It's crazy.
I mean, for so many people, this isn't some like hypothetical.
Right.
It's reality.
It is. It's a situation that millions are facing.
Yeah.
And it often feels inescapable.
Exactly. So we're going way back to the beginning for this one.
Okay.
We're going to trace the history of student loans in the U.S.
Okay.
to see just how we got here.
Interesting.
And it all started
Mm-hmm.
with good intentions, believe it or not.
Okay.
The GI Bill in 1944,
Okay.
it was meant to help veterans returning from World War II
Right.
afford college.
A good idea in theory.
Yeah. Revolutionary at the time.
Yeah. Providing direct government funding for education.
Right.
And, that model, while simple, had ripple effects for decades to come.
Yeah. A seemingly straightforward solution.
Right.
But even back then, there were issues.
Of course.
Right. I mean, we're talking about the 1940s.
Yeah.
Access to these benefits wasn't equal.
Right.
Black veterans and women
Yeah.
often faced huge barriers,
Mm-hmm.
even though they were just as deserving.
Absolutely. And those early inequities sadly foreshadowed a lot of the problems we see today.
It's true.
Yeah.
And as the system kind of evolved, those problems just
Yeah.
became even more tangled.
Yeah.
So we moved from this direct government funding model to the introduction of colleges as middlemen,
Okay.
which happened with the National Defense Student Loan Program,
Mm-hmm.
better known as Perkins Loans, in 1958.
Right.
Seems logical colleges understand their students' needs, right?
Sure.
But it added a layer of complexity.
Yeah.
And suddenly the true costs of these loans became
Less clear.
less clear.
Yeah.
It's like adding extra steps to a recipe. Pretty soon you've got a dish that's way more complicated than
Yeah.
it needs to be.
Yeah.
Then in 1960,
Okay.
things get even more interesting
Uh-oh.
with the USA Fund,
Okay.
which essentially encouraged private banks
Okay.
to start lending for education.
Got it.
They were incentivized to lend,
Mm-hmm.
with the government guaranteeing against defaults.
Okay.
But think about the social context of the 1960s.
Yeah.
Did everyone have equal access to financial resources?
Absolutely not. The same systemic biases that kept Black and brown communities,
Right.
women, and even poor white folks from accessing opportunities also affected their ability to get these loans.
It's like we're trying to fix an accessibility problem,
Yeah.
but the solution replicates the same inequalities we were trying to overcome.
Right. And this pattern of good intentions leading to unintended consequences
Yeah.
really sets the stage for the student loan landscape we have today.
And that stage gets even bigger
Okay.
with the Higher Education Act of 1965. This is where we see the birth of the Guaranteed Student Loan Program,
Mm-hmm.
which eventually gives us Stafford and FFEL loans.
Familiar names.
Names many of you probably recognize.
Yeah.
More layers, more complexity,
Right.
and the true cost for borrowers
Yeah,
becomes even harder to grasp.
it does.
Right. The system is getting more and more convoluted,
Uh-huh.
but then comes a major turning point,
Okay.
a moment that really shifted the landscape.
All right.
Between 1968 and 1971,
Okay.
interest rates shot up.
Yeah.
Imagine you're a bank lending out student loans.
Okay.
You're suddenly faced with a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Either pass those increased costs on to the students,
Yeah.
or just get out of the student loan business altogether.
It put lenders in a tough spot,
Yeah.
but the government had a vested interest
Mm-hmm.
in making sure these lending programs continued.
So instead of going for the simpler option,
Okay.
giving loans directly to students,
Right.
they chose a different path.
Oh.
They started guaranteeing lenders a certain rate of return
Okay.
on top of what students were paying.
Got it.
So let's say a student was charged 7% interest.
Yeah.
The lender might get an extra 3%
Wow.
from the government.
That's a huge hidden cost.
Right. This is where the financial burden on students starts to become less about the actual cost of their education
Right.
and more about the complex financial arrangements happening behind the scenes.
And this focus on guaranteeing lender profits over student affordability
Yeah.
would have a lasting impact.
Yeah.
It's a theme we'll continue to see as
Wow.
we explore the modern student loan landscape.
Because unfortunately, those complexities didn't go away.
Nope. Yeah,
In fact, they kind of spiraled.
they did.
So we've gone from this seemingly simple idea of direct government funding to this tangled web of guarantees and private lenders and costs that aren't always clear.
Yeah.
It really lays the groundwork for the mess we're in today.
And it is a mess. Student loan debt in the U.S. has exploded, even surpassing credit card debt.
It's crazy.
It's impacting people's lives in a huge way.
It's staggering, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars.
Billions.
And it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
No.
You know, you sent us some really powerful stories
Right.
that highlight the human cost of this debt.
The sources you provided were quite revealing.
Yeah.
One that stood out was the story of a medical student
Okay.
who racked up hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans,
Wow.
but for various reasons
Yeah.
couldn't complete their degree.
Oh, man. All that debt and no degree to show for it.
Right.
It really underscores that the promise of a high-paying job after graduation doesn't always pan out.
Yeah, it's a reminder that life happens.
Right.
And sometimes things don't go according to plan,
Of course.
but the debt remains,
Yeah,
regardless of your circumstances.
exactly. And then we saw this person
Uh-huh.
who was thinking about becoming TikTok famous
Oh, wow.
just to pay off their loans.
Desperate times call for creative measures, I suppose,
Yeah.
but it also highlights the immense pressure borrowers are facing.
It's a sign of how deep this crisis goes.
Yeah,
And of course, we can't talk about the current landscape without mentioning the pandemic.
right.
Remember the payment pause?
Oh,
It
yeah.
was a lifeline for so many people.
Absolutely.
But it's over now.
It is.
And there's a lot of anxiety about what happens next.
Yeah. The on-ramp program
Right.
offered some breathing room,
Mhm.
but even that's coming to an end.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
It can feel really overwhelming.
Sure.
But amidst all this, there are some options,
Okay.
some glimmers of hope. We're talking about loan forgiveness programs.
Okay.
They're not perfect,
Hey.
and they can be really complicated to navigate,
Sure.
but they do exist.
They do. They're not always easy to understand,
Right.
but they can be life-changing for those who qualify.
Absolutely.
Uh,
So let's break down some of the key ones, starting with income-driven repayment, or IDR for short.
All right. So with IDR,
Hmm.
you make payments based on a percentage of your income.
Okay.
The idea is to make your payments more manageable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
To make them more manageable.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It recognizes that your financial situation might fluctuate,
Right.
and it adjusts your payments accordingly.
Okay.
The goal is to eventually reach forgiveness.
Okay.
But unfortunately, there have been a lot of problems
Yeah.
with how these programs have been managed.
It's like you're on this path to getting your debt wiped away,
Right.
but then you find out your payments weren't tracked correctly,
Exactly.
or you didn't qualify for some technical reason.
Ugh, so frustrating.
Yeah.
Those inconsistencies have caused a lot of frustration and heartache for borrowers.
For sure. But it's crucial to remember that there are people working to fix those problems.
There are. That's good to hear.
Okay, so another big one is public service loan forgiveness,
Mm.
or PSLF.
Okay.
This one is for people who work in public service jobs.
Right. Teachers, social workers, first responders, that sort of thing.
The idea was to reward people who choose careers
Yeah.
that often come with lower salaries,
Right.
but have a huge impact on our communities.
What exactly?
The problem is the program was initially really hard to navigate,
I can imagine.
and the success rate was incredibly low.
We saw stories of people who had been making their payments diligently for years,
I know.
thinking they were on track for forgiveness,
Uh-huh.
only to be told they didn't qualify.
Heartbreaking.
It's awful. Thankfully, there have been some recent improvements to PSLF,
Good.
making it more accessible and forgiving.
That's great.
It's still essential to do your research
Right.
and make sure you understand all the requirements,
Of course.
but it's a much better situation than it used to be.
That's a relief.
Right.
But it's not just IDR and PSLF.
Right.
There are other options out there,
Yeah.
like total and permanent disability discharge
Right?
for people who qualify,
Mm-hmm.
or borrower defense to repayment.
Yeah.
For students who were misled or defrauded by their schools.
It's important not to assume you're ineligible for any of these programs.
Right.
Do your research, explore your options,
Mhm.
and don't be afraid to seek help from experts.
Yeah.
There are organizations dedicated to helping borrowers navigate this complex world.
That's so important. It can feel like you're battling this alone,
It can.
but there are resources and people out there who can help.
Absolutely. And speaking of things changing,
Yeah.
there's also the Savee plan,
Right.
Biden's new income-driven repayment plan
Okay.
that aims to make repayment even more affordable.
Great.
It's still facing some legal challenges,
Yeah.
but it's a sign that policymakers are trying to address the student debt crisis.
It's a good sign.
Of course, these programs, while beneficial for some,
Yeah.
don't address the root causes of why student debt has become such a burden.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound.
Exactly.
We need to talk about the skyrocketing cost of college
Right.
and explore alternative ways to fund higher education. We do.
But for people who are struggling right now,
Yeah.
it's about finding solutions, taking control, and not letting this debt define their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that starts with changing our mindset.
Okay.
Debt can feel like a life sentence,
It can.
but it's a solvable problem.
Okay.
There are strategies to manage it,
Yay.
and there's hope for a better future.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those strategies.
Right.
One of the most important, even if it sounds basic, is budgeting.
Budgeting, yeah.
It's about knowing where your money is going, right?
Even a simple spreadsheet,
Okay.
listing your income and expenses, can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
It gives you a clear picture of your financial situation and helps you identify areas where you can make adjustments.
It's about taking back control, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the question of how to prioritize your payments.
Okay.
We often hear about the snowball method,
Yeah.
where you focus on paying off the smallest debts first
Right.
for a psychological boost. While that can be motivating when it comes to student loans, it might make more financial sense
Okay.
to prioritize the loans with the highest interest rates.
Gotcha.
That way you minimize the amount of interest you accrue over time.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
You want to stop that debt from snowballing in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
I think it's worth repeating.
What's that?
Explore those forgiveness options.
Yes.
Don't just assume you're ineligible.
Right.
Thorough research and documentation can be game changers.
Absolutely. And don't forget about the power of political engagement.
Yes,
Your vote matters.
it does.
Support candidates who prioritize student debt relief and affordable education.
It's so important.
Advocate for systemic change because this issue impacts all of us.
It's not just about managing your own debt.
Right.
It's about pushing for a system
Yeah.
that's fairer and more sustainable.
A system that works for everyone.
So in this deep dive, we've gone from the very beginnings of student loans to the complex reality we face today.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
Oh.
But we've also highlighted some potential solutions,
We have.
resources, and strategies to help you take control of your financial future.
It's been a lot, right?
It has.
Oh.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah, a real journey.
Yeah.
Tracing the evolution of student loans from their idealistic beginnings
Right.
to the often overwhelming system we have today.
We've unpacked a lot of information,
Yeah.
explored historical turning points, heard some powerful personal stories
For sure.
that really bring this issue to life.
It's been eye-opening, even for me.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up,
Okay.
I want to leave you with something to ponder.
All right.
As we were going through all this research, a really interesting question came up.
Oh, yeah.
What if student loans are, in essence,
Okay.
a graduate tax?
That's a thought-provoking idea.
Yeah.
It challenges the way we traditionally view higher education.
Right.
Is it a private good,
Mm-hmm.
benefiting only the individual,
Right.
or is it a public good? Yeah.
Benefiting society as a whole.
Because we all benefit from a more educated population, don't we?
We do.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Doctors, teachers, scientists, artists,
Mm-hmm.
they all contribute to our society.
They do.
So should the cost of that education fall solely on the shoulders of those individuals?
It's a question that gets to the heart of how we value education
Yeah.
and how we choose to fund it.
Right.
If we shifted our perspective and saw education as a public good,
Yeah.
how would that change our approach to funding?
It raises a lot of interesting possibilities.
It does.
Maybe we'd see more government investment in higher education.
Yeah,
Maybe we'd explore different models altogether.
totally. It's a conversation we need to have.
And that's exactly what we hope this deep dive has sparked.
Right.
A conversation,
Yeah.
a deeper understanding of the complexities of student loans,
Mm-hmm.
and a sense of empowerment for anyone facing this challenge.
We want you to feel empowered.
This deep dive was just the beginning. We've given you the tools and the knowledge to navigate this complex landscape.
Mhm.
Now it's time to take action.
Explore the links we've provided. Dig deeper into specific programs.
Yeah.
And most importantly,
Okay.
take control of your student loan journey.
You got this. You are not alone in this.
You're not.
There are communities, organizations, and experts ready to help you.
Absolutely.
And until our next deep dive,
Yes.
keep learning, keep questioning,
Keep exploring.
and keep exploring. You've got this.